First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out on this very chilly evening. I'm Michael Zumo. I'm the president of the Long Island Lawyers Chapter of the Federalist Society for Law and Public Policy Studies. For those of you who do not know about the Federalist Society, the Federalist Society for Law and Public Policy Studies is a group of conservatives and libertarians interested in the current state of the legal order. It is founded on the principles that the state exists to preserve freedom, that the separation of governmental powers is central to our Constitution, and that it is emphatically the province and duty of the judiciary to say what the law is and not what it should be. The Society seeks both to promote an awareness of these principles and to further their application through its activities. And those of you who've been to our events, we sponsor events featuring very prominent speakers, elected officials, appointed officials, judges. We sometimes have debates, and we try and discuss issues that are current. So, I think it's a great group. If you're not a member, I strongly urge you to become one. Now, I have to give you one little caveat here, because since our speaker today has announced he's a candidate for federal office, the Federalist Society is a 501c3 nonprofit, tax-exempt, educational organization. It does not endorse individual campaigns or candidates running for election to public office. Okay, Lee Zeldin grew up in Suffolk County and graduated from William Floyd High School in Mastic Beach. He earned his bachelor's degree in political science, cum laude, from the State University of New York at Albany, and his law degree from Albany Law School. Lee was sworn into the New York State Bar at just 23 years of age, becoming the youngest attorney in New York State at that time. Wow. Lee spent 4 years on active duty with the U.S. Army and served in different capacities, including as a military intelligence officer, federal prosecutor, and military magistrate. In the summer of 2006, while assigned to the Army's elite 82nd Airborne Division, Lee deployed to Iraq with an infantry battalion of fellow paratroopers in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. In 2007, Lee returned to Suffolk County with his family, transitioning from active duty to the Army Reserves, where he currently serves with the rank of Major. He established a successful law practice in 2008 while becoming involved in local community affairs and veterans organizations. Lee Zeldin was elected to the New York State Senate in 2010. As a senator, he has successfully repealed the saltwater fishing license fee, spearheaded the successful effort to start the repeal of the MTA payroll tax. Should I say the hated MTA payroll tax? And wrote the law that protects our fallen veterans and their families from protests at military burials. In the 2012, 2013, and 2013-2014 state budgets, Senator Zeldin successfully secured funding for the PFC Joseph Dwyer program, a statewide program to help our returning veterans cope with post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. He sponsored legislation to enact the nation's strongest property tax cap and also helped reduce middle income tax rates to the lowest level in 60 years. For the 2013-2014 session, Senator Zeldin serves as chairman of the Senate Standing Committee on Consumer Protection. He also serves on the following committees: Veterans, Military Affairs and Homeland Security, Higher Education, Transportation, Judiciary, Mental Health, and Developmental Disabilities, Investigations, and Government Operations and Aging. Lee resides in his hometown of Shirley with his wife Diana and their twin daughters Michaela and Ariana. Without further ado, Senator Lee Zeldin.
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. It's great to be with all of you. Michael, thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome.
I can vouch for the fact that Michael goes everywhere to promote these events, and I know he's doing a great job running this particular group, because everywhere I see him, he has stacks of flyers for the next meeting. So on Facebook, you really do an exceptional job, and I'm happy to be here. I'm sitting at a table with a few people who helped win our race, and they said, you know, it's nice when we campaign for someone and we win. And you know, it's an uphill battle for the conservative movement on Long Island and in New York State. A lot of times you get involved in races where you know it's an uphill battle, but you believe in what they are fighting for. Even though your candidate has less of a shot of winning maybe than their opponent because of the demographics or the year, you still do what you can, knocking on doors, making calls, and every once in a while we win a few. And in our race, actually in 2010, we went in that race, we were down by over 30 points. And we're running against a guy who, he was in office, his father before him, so between the two of them, they were in office in that area for over 30 years. And we ended up winning by about 16 points. And we did it through hard work. We knocked on 12,000 doors. I knocked on 12,000 doors. The team knocked on 55,000 doors on top of that. And there is no better way to get votes than showing up at someone's front doorstep to talk to them about the issues that matter to them most. And we're here tonight to talk about the future of conservatism in New York. And actually, it's very fitting that we have some great homeschoolers here who are the future. I can vouch for personally because I've seen some of them around. They are going to be leaders in our community. And actually, during Michael's introduction, talking about that property tax cap, that whole movement literally started on the front door, the front steps of the Curly residence in Bayport. And it's true. We had a press conference there, and then we actually brought. Was the governor did the signing at your house or a different?
No, at a different house.
All right. Well, so the governor went somewhere else for his bill signing, but it started right in the front doorsteps of the Curly residence. So talking about the future of conservatism in New York State, I'm very optimistic, I'm very hopeful that 2014 is going to be a great opportunity that will be fulfilled with victories all across Long Island. Seats that right now are held by liberal, Democratic incumbents are going to turn red. We have to believe that. When we won that race in 2010, we didn't take anything for granted. We didn't wait for anything to happen on its own. We brought our message right to the front doorsteps of the people who we were trying to sway, to talk to them and sometimes debate them on issues so that they can understand why it matters that they get out and they vote. How many people do we know, friends, family, who complain to us about who's in office? Everybody. And they didn't vote. Yeah. And they wake up the next day and they say their vote doesn't matter. They wake up the next day, they're complaining about who got elected. They didn't even vote. And we all know people who we can drag out to the polls. And that's going to be so critical for us this year because the support is there for the conservatism, for the conservative movement to make a strong message. So let's talk about some of those issues. Well, last week the governor made a comment, got some bad press for, and is motivating our base. And I'll tell you what. And I'll tell you what, I believe very strongly that conservatives and the caring and compassion that we have for America's next generation, bar none, is exponentially beyond where the Democrats are today and where the liberal movement is today. Right now there's a debate about unemployment insurance. There are people who are trying really, really hard to find work. There are people all across Long Island who are working, but they're not making enough. It's the conservatives, it's the Republicans who are advocating for giving the tools to those struggling most so that they can rise out of being lower income Long Islanders or lower income Americans. Where the Democrats are pursuing policies that sustain them in lower class, sustain their suffering. It's the caring and compassion. When we talk about the debt, sometimes Republicans might get caught in statistics and graphs, and we lose our audience. We don't personalize our message of why the debt matters to them, why certain tax policy or balancing budgets matter to them. I care about our nation's debt because of these kids who are here, my daughters who are 7 years old, and the amount of debt that they are going to acquire because we have people in office, Republicans and Democrats, who totally lack the intestinal fortitude to make tough decisions that will fix these problems. Why? Because it will cost them votes. Their top priorities are their next re-election, 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 their power, their offices, their parking spaces, their committee chairmanships. It drives them and motivates their pensions. It motivates them and it drives them to make decisions that kick the can down the road for future generations of Americans. Yes, I believe that it is the conservative stand with regards to our nation's debt. The conservative stand when it comes to balancing our budget. When we talk about giving tools to people who are suffering so that they can rise out of the situation that they're in, as opposed to sustaining them where they are. I have a Black History Month celebration every year. My district actually has the largest minority population of any Senate district outside of New York City, the entire state. So every year I have a Black History Month celebration, and I come off stage this year, and a gentleman walks up to me, and Michael heard this story. I think I shared it once with you. You could tell by the way he was talking that he was a liberal Democrat. He came into the event knowing that I was a conservative Republican, probably based on some type of issue. We didn't get into it. And he said, "You are the first liberal conservative I've ever met before." And for me, you can't be a liberal conservative. And so I got to talking to him, and it turns out the reason why he used the word liberal was that during my presentation, he could tell that I cared about what I was talking about, and I cared about my community. I was showing compassion towards the people who are struggling in our community. And I think too many in the Republican Party fail to talk to those who are suffering. We write them off, we write off people who vote Democrat every year. And the fact is, it's Democrats taking them for granted because they know that they'll get their vote every year. So that made me, to that one gentleman who lives in Brentwood, a liberal conservative. The branding cue of caring and compassion is a branding cue that belongs to Democrats. Good for them. Shame on us that we have failed to bring our message to so many people in our community. It's about expanding. You were talking about the future of conservatism in New York State, whether it's 2014 or the next generation of leaders when they take charge. It's about bringing our message to people who aren't hearing it or understanding it now through all sorts of means that are available to us. On the delivery end, the Democrats do better than we do with social media. They use emails better than we do. They use phones. They have data. They know when they talk to someone about their minimum wage message, this is someone who has previously been identified as someone who says, I want to raise the minimum wage. And then they drive their message to that particular person. When it comes time for absentee ballots, there are permanent absentees. Okay, there are people who vote every single year by absentee ballot. And you know that they're going to show up. Well, Democrats bring their message to Republican women to try to peel off just enough to give them an edge with absentee ballots. You know, they are just getting one step further with their messaging, with their tactics, with their delivery, and we need to catch up in a big way. And we know what to do. We know what to do. We know on a grassroots level. I mean, it's too easy to make phone calls or knock on doors. We are articulate, we are intelligent, and we care about our neighbor. And that's why we're here. The fact is, we've been branded as this group who is here in this audience. Some would say we're right-wing. They would say that everyone, by the way, if you don't agree with them, are right-wing Tea Party extremists. Joe Lhota was a right-wing Tea Party extremist, according to Bill de Blasio. Ed Mangano was a right-wing Tea Party extremist, according to Tom Suozzi. Every Democrat is calling every Republican a right-wing Tea Party extremist. In some cases, it's working. And we can fight past that by bringing our message right to people, because they want to make an informed vote. And people on Long Island take great pride in being able to make their own decision. They're willing to go from voting Republican to Democrat on the ballot. We just have to pull them off that line a little bit, and we're going to do that in our race. When I ran in 2010 and we campaigned so hard You know, it wasn't the Carl Palladino, Lee Zeldin vote that put me over the top. You know, in that particular district, you know, Andrew Cuomo probably got 65–70% of the vote. We got close to 60% of the vote. That means that what the difference in that particular race were people who were willing to go from one line to the next to make an informed, educated decision. So on a federal level in 2014, why should people care? Why should they get involved? And what should we be talking about? Whether it's at the door or on the phones or on social media or emails. Why does 2014 matter? We know why it matters to us. Why and what do we need to be talking about to the people that we need to drag out in order to win races? Well, let's first talk about foreign policy. Right now, tonight, the president is giving a State of the Union address. Okay, the president is claiming that starting in Iran. Okay, we'll talk about Benghazi and Syria real quick too. But in Iran, the president is claiming that he has halted the enrichment of uranium and is going to prevent the Iranians from having nuclear capability through his deal that he reached in Geneva. The fact is, it's a lie. It's a lie. The Iranian president instantly discredited the Obama administration and Kerry specifically, their take on things. It is the Republicans strong on Israel, knowing that they are our strongest ally in the entire world. It is us acknowledging their inherent right to self-defense. The need to have a strong relationship with our strongest allies, and open communication and trust. This deal is going in the wrong direction. And the fact is that Iran is continuing to pursue their uranium enrichment. They're continuing to pursue their development and their construction at Arak. And that deal that we have been sold is it's a lie. Benghazi, it's a lie. With the stuff that's coming to us from the Obama administration, the lack of accountability, we want to know what happened. We want people to be held responsible. That's leadership. There are families of people who lost their lives who want to know what happened. So there's a growing movement call, a lot of co-sponsorships in Congress for creating a select committee to investigate. It's led by a gentleman named Alan Roth, who they wrote a letter with a big coalition to get support for this select committee to be created. We want accountability and transparency. In Syria, I get asked the question, what would you have done? I'll tell you what, the first thing I would do is talk to Israel. So you're faced with this problem where there are chemical weapons being used in a neighboring country. Now we have a very strong policy against the use of weapons of mass destruction. They are a neighboring state to our strongest ally. What would you do if the president sent this issue to Congress? Well, first off, I believe that the president needs to lead. He's the commander-in-chief, and he needs to make a decision or at the very least a recommendation. And I don't like the way they played that. But what would I do as a congressman? Talk to Israel. Because it's possible that a military strike on Syria might make Israel more vulnerable to an attack. Maybe Israel doesn't want us to strike Syria because that might give a reason for Iran to strike them. I've heard that theory. Maybe Israel would tell us, we need you to strike Syria. They're developing this arsenal and we need to take strong offensive action. Our enemies over in the Middle East, they don't respect weakness. They respect strength. You don't reduce sanctions when they don't comply. You increase them. You continue to turn up the pressure. These are all issues with foreign policy that all of us here in this room own over our opponents in the races when we go to those doors. And a lot of people who we go to, they care about this stuff. Now at home, President Obama's agenda must be stopped. We need to maintain control of the U.S. House of Representatives. We have to gain control of the United States Senate. We cannot give this president 2 years, free reign, control over both houses of Congress to pass his agenda. Lie after lie after lie. Take Obamacare, for example. You can keep your doctors. Premiums, we all know the premiums have now gone up. Deductibles are going up. Hours are being cut. Jobs are lost. There's a perfect issue when we go to doors of people who are so deeply upset with their government and the dysfunction in Washington, they don't believe a word that's coming out of our nation's capital, and they want to do something about it. Well, we will have candidates for Congress all across Long Island who are right on these issues. When we talk about debts and deficits and budgets and job creation and improving the business climate and reducing regulations and addressing not only people who are unemployed but people who are underemployed and not making enough, we own those issues. People care about the economy. They care about their property taxes. They want reduced spending. They want energy independence. Why are we not winning more races all across Long Island? So I come here inspired because we have a race on the east end of Long Island with a great shot of winning. I'm giving up my seat in the New York State Senate to make this run. People say to me, "Late, you could stay in Albany for 40 years." I don't want to be in the New York State Senate for 40 years. I don't want to be in Congress for 40 years. I love it when you have people who step up, they serve, and they move on. You always need fresh leadership, new ideas, a fresh perspective. You need to constantly change the people who are representing us. I don't advocate for Charlie Rangel to get replaced by a Republican. You're not going to replace Charlie Rangel with a Republican, but at least replace him with a Democrat. At least replace him with a Democrat who's a generation, or two, younger. I don't know, how he's been in office for what, 40 plus
44
years? 44 years. Replace him with someone new who's a Democrat. Now, I believe in something called effective conservatism. I believe that you could be a conservative, stay 100% true to your values, never sell out and get things done. There are a lot of different ways to accomplish it. Some people, their tactics are to, are a little bit more aggressive than others, but at the end of the day, when you have a Democratic president, doesn't need to necessarily be this one, a Democratic Senate doesn't necessarily need to be this one, but we'll use it in our example, in a Republican-controlled House. There is no way to get anything done if people aren't talking to each other. Now the problem is that we have a president who is all politics all the time. That's Chicago style. The only compromise that he is willing to agree to is for him to get it 100% his way all the time. The Republicans took heat with the government shutdown. The fact of the matter, there were thousands of solutions that the Republicans would have agreed to in order to end that shutdown. The only solution that they were not willing to agree to was for President Obama and Harry Reid to get it 100% their way. Because that's what compromise means to this president and to this majority leader. I believe in effective conservatism. It may not happen with this president. We really may be stuck for the next 2 years. But I'll tell you what, he can't get his agenda passed. We can't go into a deeper hole. We can't continue to accumulate more and more debt. And it will happen if we get complacent. So nights like tonight, all across the country, you have great candidates running for office, running for re-election. You have great candidates stepping up and running for office to unseat Democratic incumbents for the House and for the Senate. And in our little corner of America, we have this opportunity, a great opportunity. You have 3 congressional seats represented by Democrats that all can flip in November. And maybe it starts the motivation at the Davenport Press in Mineola on one particular very cold winter night. But the inspiration of knowing that we have the message to win, that we know the means of delivery to win, that it actually is ours to lose. So maybe we'll get a whole bunch of buses, January of 2015, not only to celebrate one particular seat and one change, but all across changing the landscape on Long Island. This is our opportunity. We can get it done. That's why I'm here tonight, is to talk to you not about where conservatism was, and not even so much about where conservatism is today, but what we need to do to affect conservatism in the future. Right here in New York State, in this very blue state, filled with red pockets of red-blooded Americans like each and every one of you, Thank you for having me here, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'll let Vice President Frank Mendelea have the first question.
Lee, thanks for being with us, and thanks for everything you're doing, and good luck in your race. My question is, I've been involved in the conservative movement now for over 20 years, and the one thing that's always struck me about New York conservatives is their level of pessimism. They're constantly defeating themselves before one ballot has been cast. I was actually speaking to someone the other day who lives in your congressional district, and we were talking about the race for governor, and he was already saying, well, we can't beat Andrew Cuomo. Well, I said, well, with an attitude like that, no, you can't. But there are other races that are in play, which leads us to want to have a strong candidate at the top of the ticket. How do you combat the pessimism that is at the top of the ticket and protect your race from something like that?
So first off, we have to understand that you'll never be able to get rid of all the pessimism. Some people are active because they are so totally outraged by the status quo. They're so frustrated that it's going to take a long time to make them believe. You might be able to get them to believe on a particular candidate, but as far as like an overall landscape, that's the first thing to accept. But what you can do is, and everyone's different, is to talk to them and figure out what drives them, what motivates them, and find opportunities to inspire them the same way that you're inspired for a particular cause or a particular candidate. General Petraeus said when we were going into Iraq for the surge in January of 2007, every cause for change requires a conflict. And if you want to turn someone who's pessimistic and make them believe, you have to define for them that cause, that conflict that is going to motivate them to change who represents them. So my best advice is, is to inspire people one-on-one, and hopefully there's enough people who are helping us. But there is definitely no easy solution to that one.
Hi, I want to thank you for your coming tonight and your enthusiasm and your viewpoints. I really appreciate. I'd like to know how we can institute term limits to limit the potential of lobbyists to constantly, influence the thoughts of somebody to get reelected all the time, so that their minority viewpoints get precedent over the majority. And how could we really do something to change that, because that is the downfall in my eyes of this entire nation.
So I personally support term limits. I also believe that the best term we actually have term limits where you can just vote out, vote a bum out in your current seat. I support term limits a little bit more statutorily or constitutionally, but I don't know if there's really enough support to get it done right now. What I noticed with a lot of issues like this is you really have to make it like a top campaign issue, where you have Republicans and Democrats coming into office, where people are pledging to support term limits in their move in, where as soon as they get into office in January, February, it's one of the first things they do is they deliver on their promise to enact term limits. And I just don't see enough momentum right now to actually put that issue over the top. It's something that we continue to talk about. There's some people who self-impose term limits on, and that's something that for me personally, I plan on firing myself way before other people fire me. My wife may fire me before I do.
Joe?
Yeah, Lee, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but immigration reform is going across the country right now in a firestorm. And from what I understand, that there are people in New York State that are looking to jump the issue so that New York State can be in the forefront. Can you just give us a little on immigration reform?
So, one of the problems is that every time the federal government has attempted to fix immigration, the problem has gotten worse. And right now, the proposals being floated out around D.C., I am not convinced that any of these proposals actually fix our immigration problem. Someone told me years ago that when you have a leak, the first thing you don't do is take out the mop. You turn off the faucet, right? And we have a very porous border. And when I say border, part of it's physical, where like, I actually believe in having strong defense literally on our borders of our country. Or a nation without borders is no nation at all. And I'll tell you something else, that a nation's backbone is our rule of law. And while you can, I have compassion for for that child who comes here on their own, and it's not their own decision to come to America, and they're suffering. And you could tell me stories that will tear at anyone's heartstrings. Right. But what about the person who wants to come to America with their family, but they go online or they ask their embassy and they say, "How do I go to America?" And they say, "Here's the paperwork, here's the process," and they can't come here. What about them? What about them? How do they get ahead of the line? And I think that's our nation is a nation of immigrants. We all have immigrant stories. It is something that makes our nation great. The story of how each and every one of our families came here, and all of our very diverse backgrounds from all over the world. But you can't have a fix to immigration that does not secure the entry process. And I think that's one of the deepest flaws. You can't really even have a conversation on how to fix the immigration problem until you deal with that first. Mm-hmm. It's not even part of a solution where while you are fixing the entry process, you're also doing 12 other things. You have to stop it. What happens is that you're just going to have a flood of additional people coming in for whatever system is created in place. And what about the people who refuse to cheat the system and they waited in a line? Why shouldn't they be first? So that's just a couple thoughts. I think it's something that we need to address, but we can't just address it because it's politically expedient. Just because 1199 SEIU has a big war chest and a whole lot of volunteers who can go flood a district and win a campaign, where we get jammed into doing something that makes the problem worse before it gets better. We need to do it based on merit, not because someone's scared of losing their next election.
I got to follow up on the immigration thing. There's an aspect of immigration that very few people talk about, and that's legal immigration. I think we have a major problem with that. I suspect a quid pro quo is happening by countries like China, India, etc., where we grant visas to people of those countries in order to facilitate more movement of our industries to those countries. I'm very worried about legal immigration. I'm very worried about that. Can you do anything about legal immigration?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot with regards to our visa process, our work permit process. A lot of people who are here illegally came here illegally. A lot of people come to our schools. They end up staying. We educate them. They become PhD students. There are certain people who are coming here legally who would be great to continue to stay here and provide and participate. The whole process is so inconsistent. It's so wrongfully adjudicated as far as whether person A or person B stays. I think that with regards to visas and work permits, there's a great opportunity because a lot of people who are staying here illegally, I think that we would want to allow to stay and contribute to society where other people are leaving. A lot of people want to come here, they want to pay taxes, they want to come temporarily, and they want to go back home. I think there would be a lot more accountability. You can identify people, you know who they are, where they live, and I think it'd be a little bit less of a problem if we dealt with that legal aspect of immigration as well, which actually compounds the problem.
So we'll go to Don this way. We're sort of sweeping across, and we'll
Yeah,
go back this way.
I understand that one of Long Island's congressman, and it might even be the fellow from the 1st District, is under investigation because he allegedly tried to help a constituent get firework permits for a bar mitzvah, and then shook the person down for, say, I think it was $1,000 or something like that. So I was just curious, if you were elected, how much would you charge for a wedding?
This constituent services are free. Anybody in my district who ever wants anything, you email us, you call us, you write us. We're here to help. No questions asked.
Is the bag
This-
on here?
This bar mitzvah gate that you speak of happens to be my opponent.
Oh, I didn't know.
So we'll see how this, how that all plays out. What I will say, as a former federal prosecutor, I have a lot of respect for the process. Letting the facts come out and let the people make decisions on their own what they would like. But so far, there are a lot of questions being asked, a little more questions than answers, and it might come up again at some point during the campaign. We'll see.
New York City has recently elected the most left-wing mayor since
Ever.
I don't even know when. And he's been in the New York Times as the leader of the mayor's group that's going to the White House to demand, taxes on the rich and more social spending and immigration, the whole laundry list of neo-socialist or neo-communist ideals. Do you see de Blasio as being a net benefit to New York conservatism? Because now people will actually see why they moved to Long Island 20 years ago when the squeegee men were out.
Yeah.
Right.
I tell you what, no, I don't think it's a good thing for us. You might be able to, for people who stay, for businesses who stay, there's, you might be able to argue that there's a gain because they want to stay and fight and they get inspired and they get involved in campaigns in different capacities. They vote, they talk to their employees. But what's happening is that the message that there's no place in New York State if you are pro-life, if you are if you're not in favor of same-sex marriage, if you are pro-Second Amendment, you are an extremist and you need to leave New York. There are people who have stood up on the floor of the state Senate. A Democratic senator says it is patriotic to pay taxes. And one of my Republican colleagues stands up and says, if it's patriotic to pay taxes, we live in the most patriotic state in the entire union. And the fact is, we already have the highest corporate individual marginal income tax rates in the entire country, right here in New York, and the highest property taxes. I don't think that electing Bill de Blasio is anything that helps. I don't think it helps any New Yorker.
How do we fight him?
You need to beat him. But you know what? You're not going to beat Bill de Blasio in New York City. I mean, you could fight him. You could try to keep him honest. But I'll tell you what, when he goes to Albany, like he was yesterday. Yesterday I was with Bill de Blasio.
Lucky you.
Lucky me, right? By the way, he's not only the first this and the first that. He's also a pretty tall guy. I didn't realize he's like it's like 7'6" or something like that. But he's one way to stop Bill de Blasio is making sure that there is regional balance and political balance in the New York State Legislature. You are not going to put a Republican majority in the New York State Assembly this November, but there is an opportunity across the state of New York, especially with a few seats upstate, where the balance in the state Senate can become more Republican and more conservative, and it makes it difficult for Bill de Blasio to get his agenda passed if there is not a clear Democratic majority in both houses. We saw it. There was one term, 2009, 2010. Democrats controlled the governor's mansion, the Senate, the Assembly. That's how you got the MTA payroll tax. You got 124 new taxes and fees, $13 billion in new taxes and spending. The reason why that happened was because we got lazy as New Yorkers, not we in this room. I'm sure you're all out campaigning hard. We as New Yorkers got lazy and put the Democrats in charge of all the state government. Because Obama was the man. He was going to come fix all of our problems with hope and change. And we ended up with a Democratic majority in the New York State Senate. That's the check, I think, to Bill de Blasio, because so much of his agenda has to go through Albany.
Adam.
I have a real passion for preserving our nation's history and historic sites, and I actually work for the National Park Service, so could you share with us your views on preserving historic sites, and if you would be willing to work in a bipartisan fashion with both Republicans and Democrats to preserve our history and national parks?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, I don't know how familiar everyone is with the history of a place like Shirley, Mastic Beach. We get a lot of bad press. We have We're oversaturated with sex offenders. We're oversaturated with sober homes. We also have a lot of history. Purple Heart. We have a lot of positive history. You know, the Purple Heart. It started, you know, at the Manor of St. George. You know, the battles that took place, the American Revolution, George Washington, one of the you know, William Floyd, who lived in that area, was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. You know, and there's even newer history. I mean, we have the TWA 800 Memorial. All across Long Island, you know, are these sites to preserve. Now, I take, you know, if any of you were to take a trip over to Greece, and you go to the, you know, Acropolis, where, by the way, just a small tangent, for the last 30 years, they've been rebuilding the Acropolis. Yeah. Do you know how long it took them to build the Acropolis for the first time 2,500 years ago?
Probably a couple of years.
5 years. They built the Acropolis in 5 years. They've been rebuilding it for 30. And there's like there's one union guy who's just, you know, just taking his time on that one rock. Went to visit. But anyway, you know, it's important to protect everything that makes our nation great. What so many people fight and die for, they, you know, they believe in our Constitution, our freedoms, and our liberties. America's history. It's something. It's part of that responsibility to that next generation to preserve and protect. So you know, I like your question. It's something that it doesn't really poll as the you know, as the top issue of concern to a lot of people. But you know, for many, the stuff is important. So I'm glad you asked, and I'm glad you care.
This young lady over here.
Okay, I would like to hear you speak about your point or what we can do about the Common Core, the nationalization of education in our country.
Well, I do not support Common Core. Just throw it out there. This is a national. I don't care what kind of spin that supporters of Common Core say about how this is state-driven. This is a national takeover of our education system. I believe in local control. I believe in curriculum and standards and testing being developed at the school district and state level. Anyone who says, and we have a lot of congressional representatives who claim that this is a state issue, any of them who claim that, you know, if you want to keep them honest, hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money, taxpayer dollars to Washington, was used to fund the consortiums. The two state-based organizations that get all the credit for creating Common Core were recruited by one national non-for-profit out of Washington. And in order to bribe states to sign on to Common Core, to get them to, you know, giving these waivers, if you want a waiver, we'll give you money, you had to sign on to the curriculum. And what happens, and the state does this as well, but the federal government, they pass policies that are so deeply flawed, that are so destined for failure, that the only way to get anyone to sign on is to put money attached to it to cash-strapped states. And that's what happened with Common Core. With Race to the Top money, with No Child Left Behind money, with the waivers, it was a bribe. It was a bad policy. Now, the one thing to understand, it's very important about Common Core, just as far as talking to others about this issue, is that there are Common Core standards that come from these consortiums. The tests are written by New York State. The curriculum is set by the school districts. And no one's talking to each other. So our kids are learning a curriculum for a test that the teacher has no idea what it'll look like, based on standards like a domain for 6-year-old first graders of English language arts for world civilizations to learn about the importance of Mesopotamia, or the strategic advantage of the Tigris and Euphrates River for the creation of the city of Babylon. 6-year-olds. So the standards aren't, I just don't like the standards. It's not calibrated to the tests and the curriculum. It's got to go, if you need any better reason, Arnie Duncan likes it. But you know, the Obama administration, they love to dictate what our curriculum is in our school districts. And the best way to stand up to that is to say no to Common Core. And that's something that affects federal races and state races. And don't let anyone off the hook, because you'll have people at the state level claim it's federal, and federal it's state, and they're full of it. They just don't want to be kept honest.
Gotcha.
Anyone over here? Mr. Green.
Yes, sir. Can we, and is it possible to bring individual union members over to our side?
Absolutely. You know, there are. I'll tell you what. There are people who I talk to who, they might be a member of like the local trades union, and they have had so much trouble paying the bills and supporting their family for years. They want jobs. They want their government working. They pay the property taxes and the gas and the food. They're struggling like we all are. We all hear the union story of where you have someone who may be making $60,000 base salary. They're abusing overtime. They're making $220,000. They're retiring with ridiculous pensions. They take their pensions and they go get another job that they're making $200,000 or $300,000. You have a lot of people who are in unions who are struggling. You have a lot of people in unions, especially trades unions, who are actually not even working. Our message about job creation is something that resonates with people who are unemployed, whether you're a union member or not. It does not matter whether or not you belong to the local operating engineers or not. If you don't have enough money to put food on the table, they're listening, and they're willing to hear our message.
Any more questions? Adam, you have is there anyone who hasn't asked the question yet first? Who wants to ask one? Then we'll do round two. How many more questions can you take? It's 10 to 8. I know you got to tuck in the kids, right?
Take a couple more, I guess.
All right. Well, these two gentlemen, Adam and then Gary.
When you're elected to Congress, what committees would you like to serve on, and what issues are most important to you? And when you're first elected to Congress, is there a piece of legislation that you would like to introduce first?
That's good. That's good. The award for best questions. No, I would say that if I'd be deeply disappointed if I'm not sharing Ways and Means out of the gate by the time. I'll aim high. If they don't give me the gavel, I would like to impact our nation's tax policy, get involved in our budgets. There are several different committees that have that within their jurisdiction. And I want to make as much of a difference as I can, from an economic standpoint. I'd love to be involved in the House Armed Services Committee. It's something very personal to me. There are many committees that where you can have great impact on your constituents. So I don't know what committees I will end up getting, but I think that if I had a choice of two. I would look for the maximum impact on the economic front, and I'd love to have the maximum impact on the veterans front. 40 years ago, over 70% of Congress were military veterans. Now that number is 20%, and it's falling fast. And something that, and it was mentioned briefly in the introduction about the PFC Joseph Dwyer program, which I created in New York State. Started in 4 counties, it's up to 11 counties. We have veterans, they look like they're coming home in one piece, but they return home with the mental wounds of war. They're not getting enough help from our federal government. There's a vacuum that's created, and individuals, groups, local governments, fortunately New York State stepped up for some. I think that there's a tie-in not only in serving on that community and getting involved in our nation's defense, but specifically, you're talking about introducing legislation. I want to fill that void on the mental health front for our nation's vets. It's not the sexiest issue. I don't do it because it's going to make the front cover of Newsday. There are probably better issues if you're looking for news clippings, but it's something that is deeply, deeply personal to me. I have lost friends in combat. I have lost more friends at home after combat.
Gary.
Just one quick question again. And your answer to her before about the Common Core kind of made me think of this. There's a movement on in this country to repeal the 17th Amendment, which changed the electoral process of U.S. senators from states' legislatures to popular elections. There's a new movement on now to reverse that, to repeal the 17th Amendment. I don't see that would make any change in the partisan makeup of the U.S. Senate. However, I do think that there's a possibility that the senators would not necessarily, the states would say, listen, we don't want any unfunded mandates. How do you feel about that?
Well, I like the ability of knowing that we have the power in this room to to slay the beast and recruit Mike Zuma for U.S. Senate against Chuck Schumer in 2016.
If nominated, I will nominate.
By the way, we have a video camera here, so I was waiting for him to show up, Schumer. But
If he would have been here, there would have been some guy walking in front of
there
him.
must
with
be
a
somebody
sign.
with a bigger
Senator
camera
Chuck
somewhere else.
Schumer.
You know, personally, until we change the trajectory of a state like ours, I want the people to have the vote of deciding, who represents us. I think even if we change the trajectory, it might not change my opinion even then. But I don't like the fact of taking away any power from the people right now. But I've heard merit on both sides of the argument. It's something I'm very open-minded to, but it's something I think that's where I am right now.
Lee, can I just ask a quick follow-up? I know you said you wanted to be on the Ways and Means Committee, the chair.
Chair of it, yeah.
Right. Tax policy. Flat tax, fair tax. Any opinion?
I think with the way that Congress is structured right now, I think the best goal would be a flatter tax to start. I don't think that we are going to be able to simplify the tax code as much as we want to coming straight out of the gate, but we need to start moving in the right direction. I think that a flatter text than we have right now is the best start. There are a lot of, by the way, there are multiple solutions to our problem that would simplify our code and make a lot more sense that I would get behind. So I'm not saying this all stubborn like there's only one solution. There's multiple solutions. I mean, the fact is, if you want to raise more revenue, you don't have to raise taxes at all. The fact is, you have so many people in this country who aren't paying taxes. They're not paying any taxes whatsoever. And I think that it's something to note that raising taxes is not the answer. It's also not the best solution.
Stimulate growth.
Yeah, you get more people working. What are you going to do about unemployment? What are you going to do about Social Security? How do you want to get more money to pay into Medicare? Well, leaving out the Obamacare example with Medicare, I would say with a lot of these solutions, there is more fluidity into these areas of the federal government by getting more people to work.
What's unemployment in Idaho? North Dakota.
Yeah, no, it's the lowest in the country.
All right. Well, I don't know. Marilyn, the lady goes first, and we'll do two more quick questions, and then I think Lee's got to go.
Yep.
Senator.
Yeah, one last one over here too.
Oh, okay.
When you
Using your
get,
peripheral.
Let's make them quick, though.
when you get to DC, will you support the bill that says any laws you pass you must live by?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's called leading by example, right? There are a lot of value on my dog tags in the Army. It was the acronyms: leadership, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. When I joined the Army and I put them on my dog tags, though all those words meant something to me, but they all meant more to me after being in the military a little bit longer. You know a little bit more about what selfless service feels like, a little bit more of what integrity means and the impact of not having it. What does personal courage really mean? We need more of it in Congress. There are a lot of principles and values related to leadership that are lacking in Washington. If it's good enough to pass on to people, it's good enough to live by.
Frank.
As a gun owner, thank you so much for your steadfast support of the Second Amendment and for opposing the SAFE Act, even though I know you weren't technically there to vote against it. We appreciate your statement.
That's a whole other meeting, by the way.
Yes, yes. But my question is, in terms of the SAFE Act, what are the realistic chances of eventually repealing it, or do we have to do that through the court system?
Okay, so by the way, so going into this year, I've cast 4,118 votes. I'm going to take one quick tangent because it's just intriguing and just a Federalist Society would be interested in knowing. I'm going to let out a big secret from Albany that you guys don't know about. I would say about 25% of those votes that are cast in the last 24 hours of session. It starts early in the morning one day, it ends early morning the next day, and we go through the night. At the end of the night, the best image that I have in mind is State Senator Gustavo Rivera from the Bronx doing a face plant into his desk. He has the sleep medicine right next to his head. And there's like 13 of us left in the chamber, and we're passing votes. Bills that are this thick going down on our desk, and as they're going down on our desk, they're hot off the press, They did not exist until they're on our desk. And as they're getting put on our desk, they're being voted on. Being voted on.
Sounds like
You know what I do? You know what I do is I'll just, if I don't, I just vote no.
Yeah.
You know, I got covered. And then they come up to me afterwards like, how could you vote against that? Like, I have no idea what it is. It's easier to defend a no vote on something than than a yes vote about the SAFE Act. So this was the only vote that I love it in like perfect attendance and whatnot. Give me my red ribbon or whatever. I was excused. The reason why I was excused was I was on active service with the Army Reserves. Before I left, I was told that there would be no major votes while I was gone. And in the middle of a day on a Monday, the SAFE Act doesn't even appear yet. Actually, it didn't appear until later that day. But there was word that we may be voting on this new bill. I got phone calls, people encouraging me, that we need to support this. Go fly a kite, and here's why. And I spoke to them on the merits, and I spoke to them on the politics. Like, there's absolutely no way that I'm possibly supporting this thing. And I actually put out a statement during the vote, basically say, if I was in my seat right now, this is my statement against this bill. A-rated in 2008, 2010, 2012, A-rated by NRA member. I'm strong on the Second Amendment. Not afraid to say that I am a New Yorker running for office in the state of New York, and I say I'm an NRA member, and I'm not afraid to admit it. With regards to the future and where we're going forward, if the bill came up to the floor for a vote today, it fails. Not even close. If a bill to repeal it. If a bill to repeal it comes to the floor right now, it fails. It doesn't pass. So any advocacy of like, we need to bring this, Senator Marchione has a bill to repeal it. I co-sponsor it. Great bill. I think everyone should sign on as a co-sponsor and we should pass it. Problem is, you bring up Senator Marchione's bill to the floor right now, it fails. So the best, if you want to talk about the most realistic short-term answer, is through the courts. District Court a few weeks ago, U.S. District Court out in the western end of New York State ruled 7-round ammunition component of the law is unconstitutional. It said the assault weapons ban is constitutional. I disagree with that. I'm hoping the U.S. Court of Appeals and U.S. Supreme Court agrees with me. It is moving through the system. There will be a decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals. I predict that the U.S. Supreme Court will take the case, and I also predict that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to overturn at least parts of the SAFE Act. I do not know how much of it they will overturn. That's the big question. But if you want to talk about the most realistic path forward as far as the SAFE Act, I believe it's through the courts. And I'm not saying that because I don't want us to. I want it to be someone else's problem. I'm happy with it being my problem and the legislature's problem. But the real issue is that it's just the votes aren't there.
We have one more over here, and I think we want to go. So it's already 8.
Or two parts, if you will. It seems to me that more and more conservatives are attacked, and especially on religious liberties and the Second Amendment issues. Those are two issues that are really dear to me. And I just don't know how we can combat that so that, in this state and also federally, so that we can, change some of this. So that, the Constitution in these ways that we're supposed to have rights really means something.
So I want to apologize for something that this is a word that I've used all tonight. And I don't like to use this word, and I did. And there's, sticking with the military theme, there's a saying in the military, you probably have heard it even in civilian life, but there's no such thing as problems in life, only challenges and opportunities. Okay, now and I've used the word problems a lot tonight. And don't look at any of the stuff that says problems as problems. They are opportunities. They are challenges. There was something that was said last week, by our governor about who should stay and who should go. The fact is, there's a place in New York whether you are pro-life or pro-choice, whether you are for same-sex marriage or against it, no matter what your difference of opinion is of how the Second Amendment should be interpreted. We debate our friends and our family. There are people who disagree with us, but there's a place for every single one of them in our state. I am, and I've always been willing to lay down my life in protection of everything that makes this country as great as it is. And when I came back home from military service off active duty and move on in Code Pink, would stand in front of a military recruiting center protesting our military I would stand with the counter protest. I know Grace was there. Stand over the counter protest across the street, and when a TV camera. I remember the first interview when I was asked about it. The first thing that crossed my mind is that that's the reason why those people sign up to serve. The reason why I signed up to serve are for idiots like that to have the constitutional right to do something as foolish as they were, with no appreciation for the sacrifice of those who sign up. You know what? It's their right to do. You know, it's not their right, and I heard a shout out to the Westboro Baptist Church. It is not their right to protest at their funerals. I don't care. I don't care what kind of an argument you want to make that you can crash a funeral. That's where I draw the line, and there needs to be a balance. But but with regards to your point, I think it's incredibly important for us to stay, to fight, to debate people who disagree with us, but don't kick them out. And we get attacked, and all of us get called right-wing Tea Party extremists for political partisan opportunity. It's inaccurate, and they are the ones who say that if you don't agree with them 100% of the time, that you should leave the state. Mayor Koch said, Michael, you were there, Grant was there, I referenced a quote, and it's great inspiration with this point of what was said last week. Mayor Koch once said that if you agree with him 9 times out of 12, vote for me. If you agree with me 12 times out of 12,
get your head examined.
See a psychiatrist. It has, and that's, rest in peace. That's his approach, and I agree with that. And I agree with that. There are people who are getting so much power, and they their ivory tower is higher than ever. That if you don't agree with them 12 times out of 10, that you need to see a psychiatrist, you need to get out of their state. We need to stand and fight.
Yes, we do.